Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is my first scene. I've called it the Beekeeper scene for reasons that you will become clear once you've seen it. Right, first of all, I'm just showing how I keep my clear stamps at the moment. Now, I did do a blog post about swapping it over to the scrap rack, but as I'm sure you are aware, I have too many stamps to put into the scrap rack relatively quickly, so I'm just taking the time. Now, I'm just showing some stamps. That grey one is to do with the Ink stamping circle. You just makes it so you can use clear stamps. And now in these binders, there's Hobby Arts, there's Cardio stamps, it's mainly Hobby Arts in the second one and some Lindsay Mason. Now this second one here that I'm showing is the one that I pick the stamps from for the scene. So here's me picking stamps. What I do is I just pick out the ones that I like the look of and that inspire me to actually create something. So what I'm doing is I'm attaching them to acrylic blocks so they don't get lost on the desk. Sorry. I'm just getting a couple of other sets that when I stamp it's all ready to go. So all I do is pick out the ones that I like the look of. I don't necessarily use them all, but this is my process. I do take some out of this one as well. I will show the stamps on the block in a moment. It is a bit fast, but I will show them. I've had to speed this up to 3 times just because it took me about an hour or so and I didn't want you to be waiting for so long. So this is me just deciding not to use any from the other block, and I'm just taking a couple of others off that I've seen since, and then we'll be nearly ready to go. Okay, so I'm just getting myself ready. There's the stamps on the block. That wasn't long enough to look at, but obviously you could pause the video and try and look. Okay, so here's the watercolour paper. I don't know what size it is. I can get the dimensions for you and post it on the blog post. The link will be down below. Right, so I'm just getting some scrap paper out, which originally I was going to stamp onto, but I changed my mind. In a moment you'll see this, and I got my Perspex block out to do it on instead. It is yellow tinge because there's backing paper on the back just to stop it being so sharp and scratched easily. So I'm now going to mask and tape it down to the Perspex block. The reason I put it onto the Perspex is so I can stick it down and it won't wrinkle, and so I can have a nice little white border, which is why I'm putting the masking tape on. What I do is I rip the masking tape off the roll and then stick it to my leg to make it less sticky, and then stick it down to the board. The reason to make it less sticky is so that when you peel it back, it doesn't lift up the edges of the paper. So I just make sure all the pieces are stuck down around the edges, and then I just run my fingernail along the edge just to make sure it's definitely pressed down, because if it's not pressed down enough, it can seep under the edge. Another reason to do this is just so that you get the nice sort of border around the edge. It looks like a matting around your watercolour piece. I do really like the way it looks, as you'll see in the end when I show the still of the photograph. It does add quite a nice touch to the piece. Obviously, if you don't want to stick it down, you don't have to. Right, so there we go, we're ready to start. So what I do is I usually just hover the pieces over the piece of paper just to see where I want things as I go along. Sometimes I will have a clear plan in mind, and other times I'm just go with it. So I decided which building I wanted, and I'm just now stamping it in. After that, you will see that I again do the same thing where I lay the stamps, sort of hover them over the scene. I wouldn't lay them down in case there's ink on them, but I do hover it over. So I'm just clearing the stamp off, and then we move on to the next stamp. So I just pick up some stamps and sort of hover over where I want them, just decide if I want a border in, or this tree I did decide I wanted in. So I start inking it up, and then I actually changed my mind just before I stamp it down. So I'll ink it up, hover it over, about to place it, and then I decide that I actually want to do something else at the front of the piece, which won't actually get stamped in because of the way I want to use it. But I'll show you that when it gets to that. I'll tell you more about that when it gets to that part of the video. Okay, so I just hover in another building, see if I wanted to use that, and then I end up deciding to go for a hedgerow. So the hedges I stamped from one side to the other. I do use post-it notes. Here are the post-it notes. So cover the building and cover the hedge just to make sure that it doesn't go back over itself. I don't want the big lumpy bit at the end of the hedge that you can see there to go onto the scene because it'd look a bit weird. So I just keep blocking bits off with the post-it notes and using the bit I actually want to use all the way along. And there we go, I've done that one. Now I decide to do the back row. I decided to put in a back hedge row which I again do with post-it notes, which should be about to happen any minute now. Here we go. Right, so I actually end up masking off the building again and the hedge and going at a slight angle, which means that in perspective wise, it looks like the front is a hill that's coming in front of the house, and the house is behind that sort of slight hill, which is what I like the look of. Okay, so then I do try and decide then what to put on next. It does take me a little while just to figure out what I want on, just because I didn't have a plan. This is a stamp that I definitely wanted on there, which was the main focal point of the scene. In my opinion, it was the main reason for me doing it. This is the bee huts, and I really liked the huts, and I haven't been able to use them on anything else, so I thought I'd give them a try. So then I have to try and decide where I want them, so I put them there, and then I try and decide if I want them in a row. I thought I did, and then I changed my mind, so I didn't end up actually stamping it down. I did 2 separate sort of rows of them, as though they were sort of lined up. If I could go back, I'd probably just try and draw in like a little smudge of something that could look vaguely like a smaller bee hut, just to keep perspective. And because of the perspective, I wanted something a bit closer to the front, just to show that they are obviously smaller than, not quite as close to the viewer as you think. So I put that little stump there and put an owl on top, just to give the viewer something to focus on at the front of the scene. Now this is the bit I was discussing. I wanted these little flowers at the front, and I was going to draw them on, I was going to colour them in with the watercolour marker and then watercolour them in, but I thought they might get smudged into the other stuff, so I decided not to do that at this moment in time. So then I put the stamps to one side and decided to come back. So here we are with the blue sky. So I used Distress inks for this, and I just get them all out, place them onto the plastic palette that's in the shot there, and then decide which ones I want to use. The scrap paper is just for me to test out the sky, just so I know roughly what it'll look like and whether I'm happy with how it looks. So I think the colours I end up using are Broken China, Mermaid Lagoon and Stormy Sky, but I can't quite remember. So here it is, me practising with them. If you have Distress inks and you want to know the exact colours, what I recommend is just practising with them until you get the sky you want, rather than just going based off my colours, although they are the colours I used, I'm 90% sure. I do intend to make a colour chart for my watercolour Distress ink section. I do have one for the stamp colours, but it doesn't work out quite so well when you want to watercolour, because they don't always look the same when they're in a scene. So there's me liking the end result. So I end up taking water and putting it on. I use a relatively big brush, but not as big as I would use if it was a bigger scene. So I wet all the top of the sky, and then we go in with the colours. So that's Broken China for definite. And then there's a bit of Mermaid Lagoon going in a moment. I'm just taking some of the blue off the building. It doesn't bother me too much if it goes in, but I only wanted a bit. So that was some Mermaid Lagoon, sorry. And then this bit that I'm putting in is Stormy Sky, I believe. I add that in a horizontal to give a bit of an atmospheric appearance. And then I go back with the lighter and lighter colours until it washes out into the lightest blue. Okay, so then I just clean the palette off with a baby wipe, and then I use a piece of kitchen roll just to make sure there's no blue left on the plastic palette. And then I get the greens out. And now I would like to explain, the camera battery died a couple of times in this process, but because of where I was up to, I didn't have time to stop and charge the battery straight away. So I start wetting the grass, but unfortunately the grass bit is missed. But the green colours I used are bundled sage, peeled paint, mowed lawn and a bit of hickory smoke. So I'm wetting the grass now, but you won't unfortunately see me colour the green in. I did want to keep showing the video though, just because I like the scene, and it is the first one I've done, so I just wanted it as sort of a trial attempt at editing and posting. I thought you might still get some information. So there we go, there's the green done. Right, so unfortunately obviously you did miss me seeing the green, but I'm showing you the green colours that I'm using and what I did. So at the back there is a row of trees. What I did was I just laid the green in. I think it's bundled sage with a tiny bit of pesto in there and a bit of hickory smoke. And then I scratched in the sort of tree lines with that palette knife that's there. So what I'm now doing is I'm practicing to see if a technique will work that I want to do. So I lay all the greens down that I've just used. I am sorry, it's still slightly out of shot. I have now got a new camera, so that when I record the next one I will be able to see what's in shot and what's not. But at this point I couldn't see what was in shot. I assumed it was, but only some of it is, unfortunately. So I'm just laying down the greens. I do put it to one side to dry, and then I come back and test out whether the red will show. Right, so next we're going to do the buildings and the bee huts. So what I do is I lay down some browns and hickory smoke and black soot onto the plastic palette, and then I can just brush those in where I want them. Okay, so here I go, I'm getting all my browns out. Slightly off to the left of where I'm sat is my container where I just draw my Distress Ink minis, which are all lined up, which is really easy to get to. Okay, so there's me putting them all in. Now I can't remember which browns I use for which bits. I only remember the grey and the black because it's the only grey and the black they have in the line. The browns shown there are the ones that I believe I used, but I'm not entirely sure. But if you've got them yourself, just have a practice with the colours and see which ones you like, because you could have used many different browns for the building. What I did was I put down hickory smoke first onto the roof, and then put in the shading with black soot around the edges, just to make it so that the light was slightly catching the roof and it wasn't all plain black. I then go into the chimney pots and do them in a very similar way, but because of the size, the shading obviously isn't as important because you can't really see the shading that I'm doing. Now I'm just showing the brush. There's a Winsor & Newton sable round. I believe the size is a 0. I think it was a 0. And I'm just doing the tiny little bits on the chimney tops, and then I go in and start on the building. Now for the building I use some greys first, just to enhance the shadows for when I put the browns on. So what I do is I put in some water, just to make it blend a bit easier, and then I do put a layer of hickory smoke in. There it is, there's the grey going in. I just sort of fade out the edges a little bit, and then I bring in some of the brown, and here we go, there's the brown. So this is the lightest brown going in. And then I go in with slightly darker brown until I get to the darkest brown. And at each one I just blend it into the next colour and take the lighter colour over the top of the darker colour, just to make it sort of transition a little bit better. So now I go on to the side of the building and do the same thing again on the side. So the lighter colour goes in first, and then the shading goes in around the edge. So here's the next darkest colour, and then that goes in just to highlight the darker points, and again I blend it out with the lighter colour, and again then the darker colour goes in, and the same thing happens again, just to make sure the transition is smooth. Okay, now I'm starting on the bee huts. I actually wanted these sort of white, so I ended up shading them in grey and black. The grey and black sort of did go a bit heavy-handed just to make it pop a bit against the green. So they are more grey now than they were white, but I'm still pleased with them. So I'm putting in hickory smoke in the shadows, in the sort of lighter shadows, and then I go back in with black soot. I don't do each one in turn, I do sort of jump between each one, as you will watch in a very short moment. Here we go, I've jumped from one to the other one, and then I will end up going back to the first one just to do some more blending on it. There we go, I've jumped back to the first one again to put some more blending in. And now we go to the third one and put some grey in, and then again do the black shadows on the darker points of the sections where the darker shadows would be. Okay, and I'm on to the last one with the light grey, sorry, I keep wanting to say brown. And then I end up putting the black in. And again, the video did cut off unfortunately, but you only missed me putting the shadows in. And now I'm painting in the brown on the stalk of them stumps. And then I do paint in the owl next, I believe. There we go. So I'm putting grey on the owl. I want him to be slightly grey and white. So the grey's going on. And then there is a touch of black added to him. And then I do put in a slight bit of extra grass around the outside of the bee huts. I didn't feel it was quite dark enough, so I just put another layer of water down and then put a bit more green in. You do unfortunately have to put the layer of water down everywhere, otherwise you will get what's known as blooms, where it's dry and wet together. It'll leave a harsh edge, and I didn't want any hard edges on the grass. So I'm just layering in the water now, and then a bit of green will also be on the brush very shortly. I think I might actually be applying the green now. Yep, so there's some green going on and some water just to blend it together, just around the edges. I didn't add much, but I just wanted a slightly bit of a darker green in places. There we go, so there's a bit more green there, just to make it a bit darker. At the moment I'm using a Jackson's synthetic brush. A Jackson's Kolinsky Sabre brush, not a synthetic brush. And I think it's a size 2 at that point. I just use a range of different brushes, so it's a bit hard for me to tell at any given time which one I'm using. Okay, I'm now adding some shadows into the piece just to give it a finished look, and that's it. Then obviously the camera shut off again, and this is the red that I wanted. So then the red was stamped on and blended in, and there's the finished piece without the masking tape. I think it looks nice. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.